DND number 9, Circle of Life, in Jesus' name. Chapter 18. It's April 24th, Wednesday morning, South Keno Estate, Crystal Cove, California. Ricky eyed his son as he sat down at the table next to Taylor. No one really felt like eating breakfast, but Ricky had been able to talk them into a piece of toast. Eric, what's your shooting schedule like the rest of this week? It's pretty much a wrap, Dad. I have to go in today for a little while. I'll be done by 2 or 3 this afternoon. What do you need? He sighed. Your mom looked so alone when she left this morning. I was thinking I need to be there with her. She insisted she was okay, but the more I think about it, the more I think I need to join her. Well, go, Dad. Taylor and I can get along fine for a few days. Right, Taylor? She nodded. Of course we can. I promise to drive carefully, and I won't go anywhere but school and home. Well, I'll be back before she gets home from school today, and we'll order pizza and watch a movie. We'll be fine. Ricky frowned. Dad, from what I understand, you were living alone for almost the whole year while Granddad was training Grandma for the mart. Well, I was older than you. By 1 year. Come on. It's you who's taught us to take care of ourselves and who taught me survival skills and life skills. I can handle watching out for one very mature, self-reliant teenage girl for a few days. Just let us know the funeral arrangements when you know, and we'll be there. Besides, we'll have Granddad and Uncle Jason and Uncle Justin. We're fine. Ricky nodded, then shook his head. Don't know when I got to be such a mother hen. He looked at Taylor. You'll be okay? Yes, Dad. And I can always call Grandma or Aunt Angel or Aunt Lori. Well, okay then. I'm going to pack real quick and fly out. Jason has a chopper headed that way. Eric nodded. Don't worry about us. Give Mom another hug from us. Will do. Taylor finished her toast and went to finish getting ready for school, but was too tempted to call Gabe and let him know what was happening. He answered on the first ring. Hey, Taylor, is everything okay? You usually don't call in the morning. Are you homesick? No, I'm getting ready to go to school, but I wanted to talk to you because my grandfather passed away from a heart attack last night. Gabe was silent. Grandmaster Keno is dead? His eyes filled with tears immediately and his voice choked with emotion. Oh, no, it's my other grandpa, my mom's biological father, Grandpa Robert. Gabe blew out a relief breath. Oh, okay. I mean, that's sad too. I didn't know him, or actually, I think I met him once at one of the big family gatherings. I'm sorry, Taylor, for your loss. Are you okay? Yeah, I didn't really know him that well myself. I maybe saw him a few times a year, but my mom is pretty torn up. She and my dad are going up to San Fran right now, and Eric and I will go up for the funeral. When will that be? They don't know yet. We'll probably know by the end of the day. She paused a moment. So, what are you doing today? Well, right now, I'm working on a term paper that was actually due today, but they've given me some extra time to work on it. And then I have a bunch of studying to do for the end of the year exams. So, I've never asked you this before, but what are your grades like? He chuckled. Not bad. That sounds pretty evasive. Well, what are yours like? Gabe asked. Well, I have to get all A's. You have to? Or what? Or I'll have to do 2 million push-ups and run 30,000 wind sprints. Wow, that's harsh, he said with a laugh. What happens to you if you get a bad grade? Taylor asked. I don't know. Ha ha, aren't you just so smart? Takes one to know one. Well, I really gotta run. Have a good day, Gabriel Tanner. You too, Taylor Keno, and sorry again about your grandfather. Thanks. Love you. Bye. She hung up quickly. He grinned and laid his phone down and went back to his laptop. New scene. April 26, Friday evening. Upton County High, Upton, Georgia. Gabe looked around at the full bleachers, an immense crowd. It was like a replay of Tuesday's game. People everywhere. The only difference this time was this school didn't have the color guard. The Tanner family was almost all here, minus his mom and Heather. Heather had to head back to Tennessee, and his mom was helping out at the inn. Lisa and Lena were also helping out at the inn, and the Apples had to sit this one out too. The inn and all the cottages were booked solid because someone posted about the place and the fact that the Kenos had stayed there when they'd been in town. But here at the game, Uncle Chaz and his boys, Gabe's dad with Iris on his lap, and both sets of twins were representing. He thought it would die down, but it hadn't, and Gabe didn't understand that. He shook his head. He'd again been asked to the pitcher's mound to shake hands. He'd been patted on the back and had people wish him well. It made him emotional, this outpouring of kindness. If it was just a bunch of young teen girls, he would just think it was silly. But it seemed to be girls and boys and men and women alike. He wondered what was the big attraction. The FBI had taken down the violent abduction video, but it had been mirrored so many times that there was just no scrubbing it from the internet. It looked like the other team this time, namely Upton County, had all purchased and donned Team Gabe shirts. This team had been their opener a few weeks ago and had been the first team to throw at him. Somehow, their tune had changed. He truly didn't understand. Maybe it was their way of apologizing. Maybe they were showing a united front of hometown kids who loved to play ball and shoot and take care of their women and love the Lord. All the things Mia had discussed in the video. He wondered if she thought her video would make all those things look bad, when instead it had done just the opposite. Peyton put his arm around Gabe as he sat in the dugout. "How you feeling, Gabester?" Gabe smiled. "I'm doing okay. I want to play really bad." "Well, believe me, we want you to play. Still, I'm just so glad you're alive and sitting here with us. I didn't say this over the phone, but geez, Gabe, I was scared. I heard you tell someone that you were embarrassed because you cried on that video." Gabe rolled his eyes and drew a deep breath and started to protest the direction the conversation had taken. Peyton held up his hand. "Hear me out. I'm just saying I cried too, man, and I didn't have a bullet in my leg." "Me too." Gabe looked past Peyton to see Elias talking. "I'm serious, man," Elias said. "Well, I didn't cry," Carlos added, "but I punched a hole in my bedroom wall." Gabe felt the seemingly ever-present emotions well up again. He nodded his head. "Thanks, guys." A couple teammates leaned over and patted his cap. "Now let's win this game," Gabe added. They all agreed, prayed, huddled, yelled, "Go Rebels," and went to work. Gabe's phone buzzed and he pulled it out and glanced at the text. It was from Taylor. "We're getting ready to take off. I just wanted to say hi and go Rebels before I have to put my phone away." Gabe responded, "Jason's jet?" And Taylor said, "No flying commercial. You guys winning?" "I don't know yet. Game just starting." "We'll take some vid." "Okay. Gotta go." A blowing kiss emoji. Gabe replied with a heart emoji. "What's this?" Lucas said as he grabbed Gabe's phone from him. He read the text. "Who's Taylor?" "Give me the phone back," Gabe said. "I will, just as soon as you tell me who Taylor is." "She's Ricky Keno's kid," Peyton supplied. "You're kidding me. You lucky SOB. Gabe smiled. "I am lucky." "You're lying. You do not know Taylor Keon." "You're lying. You do not know Taylor Keno," Dion argued. "Didn't you see the tournament?" Liam asked. "She was actually part of his coaching team." "So you're friends with a girl who can kick your butt?" Dion joked. Liam laughed. "She doesn't have to kick anyone's butt. Her father and brother see to that." "Yeah, and I'm pretty sure Gabe can take her," Peyton said. "Oh, I bet," Jared said with a laugh. "Peyton, you're on deck," Coach yelled. "You guys better start paying attention or there's going to be a lot of wind sprints in your future." Lucas handed the phone back to Gabe. "Sorry, Coach." Coach smiled at Gabe. "Taylor Keno, huh?" Gabe smiled back. New scene. It's April 27th, Saturday morning, Stewart Ranch, Pine Forest, Georgia. Jake and Gabe have been given some time off to shoot. Gabe wanted to see if anything was keeping him from his usual marksmanship, like maybe pain in his shoulders or if he was off balance because of his leg. Lena had been invited, but she was taking care of the horses and wanted to give Jake some guide time. Besides, she wanted to go over to the main house on the Stewart Ranch and visit her grandparents, Charles and Patricia Stewart, both of whom were in their 70s. Grandpa Charles still rode out most every morning, so Lena saw him pretty regularly. But she hadn't seen Nana Patty in a while, and they live on the same property, so there was certainly no excuse. Gabe had told everyone about Taylor's grandfather dying, and it reminded Lena that life could end pretty quickly, and it was time to stop licking her wounds and start reaching out to others. The guys finished shooting and instead of heading home, went into town to grab a late breakfast. They chowed down on some pancakes and sausage links that drowned in maple syrup at a local diner. Their conversation had centered mostly around pending court dates for both Brett Adderman and Mia Casellas, and around two young ladies. Jake confided in Gabe that he wanted to ask Lena to marry him, and the problem with Uncle Chaz vetoing the decision. Gabe confided in Jake that he was head over heels for Taylor, but knew that they were young and feelings could change. And until then, he would just let it play out, 'cause for now, he loved every single minute they spent together. They drove along, winding through the residential neighborhoods in Pine Forest when Jake slammed on his brakes. Gabe grimaced in pain as his body pressed into the seatbelt. "Oh, sorry, man," Jake said. "Are you okay?" Gabe nodded. "Yeah, what's wrong? Why'd you stop?" Jake nodded toward an older brick home. The grass was fairly high. A small, elderly woman was pushing a little lawnmower slowly through the thick grass. "You see that?" Gabe nodded. "What do you think?" Gabe smiled. "Well, I can probably handle the mowing part. You'll have to do the edging." Jake agreed. "We'll play it by ear. I don't want you to overdo, 'cause my mom would have my head." They pulled into the woman's driveway and walked over to speak with her. As soon as they told her they wanted to cut her yard for her, she started to cry. Jake put his arm around her and listened to her story. Her husband had recently passed away, and he usually did all the yard work. The people at her church were going to come out and cut it for her, but they couldn't come until next week, and code enforcement had already given her a warning. She just didn't know what to do. "Well, we'll take care of it for you," Jake said kindly. "Is this the only mower you have?" Gabe asked. "No, my husband has a riding mower for this big old yard, but I don't know how to use it." "Well, I do," Gabe said with a smile. "Don't you worry about a thing." He was glad he wouldn't have to push that tiny mower through the thick grass. He was feeling much stronger, but still a little on the gimpy side. The woman took the young men to her backyard and showed them the tool shed. Gabe started on the mowing right away while Jake did the weeding and trimming, and Jake also found some hedge trimmers and set her hedges to rights too. Gabe was mowing out near the street when a car slowed down and came to a halt beside him. For just a second, he had a flashback, and Jake started forward. No way was he going to let it happen again. "Hey, Gabe." Gabe breathed out a breath, smiled and waved. It was a car full of girls from school. One of them, Trish, his old girlfriend from 10th grade. "What are you doing?" Trish said. What does it look like?" "Well, you don't live here. I'm just helping out the lady." "That's so sweet," another girl said. She held up her phone. "Let me get a pic." Gabe shook his head and went back to mowing. "Aw, come on, Gabe," the girl said, giggling. They stayed there shooting pics or taking video, whichever. Gabe didn't want anything to do with it. He ignored them and kept working. They finished both the front and back yards and were putting the mowers and other tools away when Gabe's phone went off. "Hey, Mom." "Gabe, where are you?" "Oh, sorry, I meant to call you, Mom. Jake and I saw this lady, her name is Ms. Buckley, over here on Old Barnesville Road. She was having a hard time cutting her yard, so we stopped to help. We're almost done." "Well, Gabe, that was a nice thing to do, but did you forget that you had an appointment with Isla August?" Gabe's eyes opened wide. "Oh, man, yeah, Mom, I did forget. Is she there? How late am I?" "Well, she just got here, and I'll entertain her. You boys hightail it home, please." "Yes, ma'am, we're on our way." "Trouble?" Jake asked as he returned to the truck from giving Miss Buckley his information in case she needs help with anything else. Gabe nodded. Gabe nodded. I forgot an appointment I made with that Isla August lady for an interview. I promised her. She came all the way from California, and I'm not there. Jake smiled. Well, don't panic. She's not going anywhere. She came all the way. You're okay. I'm not panicked. My mom is not happy, though. Oh, well, then maybe you should panic. He put his hand up. Wait a minute. Did you forget to tell your mom about the appointment? No, if that was the case, I'd ask you to take me to the airport instead. Jake laughed. He tore down the road in his father's pickup. He had Gabe home in a little over 5 minutes. Gabe jumped from the truck, grabbed his bag of guns from the bed, and waved as he headed into the house. He ran in the front door, poked his head into the living room where his mother was speaking to Isla and another guy and holding on to Iris at the same time. Hey, I'm so sorry, he said quickly. Isla rose and came to him and held out her hand, which he took. She looked him over, her eyebrows raised. He self-consciously rubbed a hand over his sweat-soaked shirt. Can you give me a few minutes to get cleaned up? She smiled her regular sweet smile. Of course. You go do what you need to do. I'm a patient person. However, to make it up to me, let Dylan take a quick pick. Gabe blew out a breath and nodded and stood still while Dylan snapped off a few picks, and then Gabe turned and dashed up the stairs. It took him only about 15 minutes before he came back into the living room. Excuse me, Gabe said, but can I get anyone anything? Because I'm going to grab me some water real quick. No, we're fine for now, Isla said. Gabe grabbed 2 bottles of water out of the fridge and headed back to the living room. Isla stood again and offered her hand again. My, that was fast, and what a transformation, she said with a smile. Gabe had to force himself to not roll his eyes. May I ask what kind of body wash you use? Because you smell wonderful. Gabe chuckled. He then looked at her again. Oh, you're serious? She laughed. Of course I am. He told her the brand and then went on to explain. I just used some good old Dial soap, but my sisters are adamant that I smell a certain way. He shrugged. You like it, so I guess they have good taste. Isla laughed. Ah, Gabriel Tanner, you are a total trip. His jaw clenched, and he wondered if the hometown boy was being made fun of, but he couldn't be anything but himself, so whatever. She finally sat back down and motioned Gabe to the seat in front of her. He held up a hand. Before we get started, I need some water. Well, by all means. Gabe picked up one of the bottles of water and drank the whole thing down. She watched him, her eyes wide. Lizzie gave a soft laugh. Come on, Iris. We're going to go start some dinner, she said. I hope you two will stay, she asked Isla. Surprised, Isla nodded. Oh, we'd love to. She turned to the young man in front of her. So, before we get started, let me remind you that this is not live. So if we say anything that makes you uncomfortable, we can always edit it out. Gabe nodded. The cameraman clipped a small mic to the ribbing of Gabe's shirt. Good. Are you ready? Sure. Gabe watched as her personality brightened for the camera. Now, for the interview you've all been asking for, and I promised, we here at teenspotter.com are just giddy to be here in Pine Forest, Georgia at the home of Gabriel Tanner. Hello, Gabe. Hey. He gave a small wave at the guy with the camera. So, Gabe was actually late to this interview. She gave a slight laugh. Gabe, your beautiful mother already told us why you were late, but will you fill in our viewers? What were you doing? He drew a deep breath. Well, Jake and I, he's a friend of mine, we saw an older lady struggling to cut her grass, and we stopped to take care of it real quick. I completely forgot about the interview, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be rude. Oh, you are totally forgiven. Now tell me more about this lady you stopped to help. Well, I don't really know her. She was older and tiny and trying to push a small lawnmower through the grass, which was overgrown, so it would take her all day, if not longer. Her husband recently passed away, she told us, and she had no one to help. So Jake and I, we fixed her up real quick. No big deal. Oh, I think it's a very big deal. So, do you often do this kind of thing? Well, if I do, it's not a thing I like to go around bragging about. When's the last time you stopped to work on someone's yard? Well, not since last fall. It's spring now, so there's going to be a lot of people like that lady today who'll need a helping hand. Jake and I are always trying to keep an eye out. Is this Jake guy a classmate? No, he's older than me. We're friends because he lives next door. He's more like my brother, but I don't get to see him very often. Oh, why not? Because he's a Marine. Oh, well, that's interesting. Miss August, are you staying at the inn next door? Yes, we are. It's a lovely place. Well, he's there. You'll probably get to meet him. His parents run the place. Lovely. She drew a breath. I think it's wonderful that you stopped to help the lady. Well, really, it's no big deal. People all over the country do that kind of thing all the time. Ah, but we're not talking to other people. We're talking to Gabe Tanner. But let's get down to it. Gabe, if it's not too difficult to talk about, she said dramatically, our viewers want to know about when you were kidnapped. We've been told you were simply taken from the side of the road. Gabe frowned. Well, it wasn't simple. I had a flat tire. He went on to describe how he was taken, how he was shot, how he tried to fight off 4 strong men and failed. He ended with, and the next thing I know, I was being dragged across the floor in that old farm building, and I'm guessing you know the rest from there. He was surprised that she actually had tears in her eyes and wondered if they were real or she's just really good in front of the camera. She sniffed and wiped out a tear. We know all the way up to where they strapped you down to that table. He nodded. Did that terrible woman give you any anesthesia? He gave a soft laugh. No. Oh, Gabe, I can't even imagine what you went through. He shrugged. I pretty much passed out after the first cut, so I made it through okay. You are such a strong young man, not just in your body, but mentally tough. Did you know that the whole country is in awe of you? He shook his head. There are a lot more people in this country who are strong and suffering and could use the accolades. Like who? Well, just ask a veteran what they've been through. I actually have, but they pretty much won't talk about it. With good reason. Gabe paused a few moments and frowned. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sound rude. No worries, Gabe. I have a feeling you are never rude. Oh, I am, he laughed. Just ask my mom or the guys on the other team. What other team? He grinned. Any other team. So let me redirect back to that time after Mia Casellas operated on you. The next thing we see is you sitting on a mattress, eating a hamburger and drinking a bottle of water, and you start talking, explaining something that happened with your father when he worked undercover for the FBI. We got the idea that there was something cut out of the video. Gabe nodded. Can you fill us in? He blinked several times. Well, she took out the part where she told her own story, when she told why she was doing what she was doing. It was a sad story, and I feel sorry for what she's been through in her life. The FBI has been given an official statement about that story, and we information seekers have dug up everything we can find. Have you seen any of the reports? He nodded. Is it pretty much the same story she told you? Yes. Isla could see that he was shutting down, so she moved on. The next part we could see on the video was those men building that riser and then you challenging them. What are your thoughts on that? Gabe shrugged as he thought about what took place. Well, I had to try to take some kind of action. I'm not the kind of person who can just sit and wait for someone to come rescue me if there's something I can do for myself. So I tried. I failed. I got beat to a pulp because of it, but I had to try. Isla smiled prettily. You were awesome. I want to ask about something you said. You told that one guy that you didn't miss. If you wanted to kill him, he'd be dead. Those are some pretty tough words coming from a teenager who told me, when I asked about your guns, that you do some shooting. Gabe frowned, trying to put into words what he should say. When you asked me about the guns, I played it down because this country is pretty on edge about that topic, and I was worried about that coming back to bite me. As a matter of fact, when those men took me, my first thought was that these are people who want to make a statement about guns. But they used guns to take you. Exactly. That's the way they think, though, he sighed. In answer to your question, I am a gun enthusiast. I believe totally in our Second Amendment. I shoot a lot. Some people think that that makes me dangerous, but what that actually makes me is your protector. Because if I was carrying, which I don't because I'm a minor, but if I was, and you and I were in like a grocery store and some guy came in shooting, I would give my life to protect you. So when you told that guy if you wanted him dead, he'd be dead, that's the truth? Oh, I believe so. She smiled. Gabe, I'm trying to get you to say how good you are. I heard you're an expert sharpshooter. He blew out a breath. Sharpshooter, that's a term and title used in the military. I heard it can also be applied to a civilian. He nodded. Look, you don't go talking about what a great shot you are because then people will challenge you. You may have to take this part out of the interview. I'm just saying, for my own safety and for the safety of people around me. She turned to her cameraman. Make a note here. Got it, he said. Well, let's go back to what that man said to you. Do you now think it was a mistake to only shoot him in the leg? Gabe shook his head, trying to think how to make her understand. Well, there's a rule. When you shoot, if you have to shoot, you shoot to kill. And I broke that rule because I chickened out. I've never shot at anyone. I couldn't bring myself to do it. If I had done what I'd been taught to do, he wouldn't have been able to speak to me. I wouldn't have been standing there speaking to him, and the shooter wouldn't have been able to shoot the gun out of my hand. He paused for a second and wiggled his middle finger that still had a splint on it. Then again, even if I had killed him, I still may have not been able to get away. But maybe I would have. It's hard to say. But not killing him for sure put my father in danger, and that I totally regret. Wow, Gabe Tanner. Every time you say something, I am more and more intrigued. She smiled. Let's move on. I'd like to talk about your prayer and your faith. Finally, Gabe felt that he could relax. He was comfortable talking about his relationship with the Lord. He listened as she went over the prayer he'd uttered in his moments of anguish. He listened to her expound her own experience with prayer and its effect on her. She spoke of others who had claimed the same thing. She asked him his thoughts, and he answered the best he could. She broke down and cried and had to take a break, and Gabe drank down his second bottle of water. They'd been talking for a couple of hours, and he was pretty tired and drained. She straightened her hair and touched up her makeup. Just one more subject before we close. Everyone is wondering what you're going to do with all the money that was donated when you were abducted. Gabe nodded. This was one question he'd been ready for. Justin Lee, Jason's brother, had consulted with him and his parents and were working together. I have consulted with an attorney, and we are working to create a foundation that will be used to help people in one way or another. We don't want to help just one group like the homeless or veterans or hungry children or victims of crimes like Mia Casellas was. I couldn't choose just one, so we're looking to address several categories and figuring out how we can grow the funds to cover a lot more people. We'll eventually come up with a name for the foundation or just keep the current fundraiser name because it's already familiar. These are all things that we're looking into, and we'll keep everyone posted. Wonderful. Until that happens, you can all still donate to the Ultimate Warrior Fund for Gabriel Tanner. Gabe, my viewers and I, we just want to say thank you for granting this interview. We also want to say thank you for the amazing young man you are. I think we've all fallen in love with you just a little bit. She laughed. Well, maybe some of us more than a little bit. Gabe's face reddened. In closing, Gabe, what would you like to say to all the people out there who are watching this? Joey's words suddenly popped into his head when he said, are you going to be normal or shine your light for all to see? So what could he do right now, having been given this opportunity to speak in front of millions of people? He didn't know what to say. He closed his eyes a moment. Father, please tell me what to say. Please tell me what you want me to do. How can I serve you? And the idea popped into his head and his eyes opened. Gabe, you okay? He smiled. Yes. I thought maybe you fell asleep, she laughed. Sorry, I was praying, he stated softly. Really? What were you praying about? I was asking how I could be in service. And did you get an answer? I think so. Well, we're all listening. I'd like to offer a challenge. Like we talked about at the beginning of this interview, it's spring, and all across the country there are going to be people who need help cleaning up their yards or repairing their homes or whatever your neighbors need. I'd like to challenge you to be in service to someone in your neighborhoods in some way. It doesn't have to be yard work. You don't have to spend money. It could be anything, even just taking a minute to have a conversation with someone and ask them how they're doing. Video what you do and upload it to TeenSpotter. Let's see how innovative everyone can be. Isla clapped her hands together. Oh, this is wonderful. Okay, everyone, you heard him. I'm looking forward to seeing all of the things you do because I know my viewers are truly capable of miracles. Gabe, I'm hoping you will grant us a second interview in the future. Gabe was cornered and couldn't say anything but yes. Until then, don't forget, I'm on the lookout for remarkable teens everywhere. If you know a remarkable teen, shoot us an email. Thank you again, Gabe, and God bless. She sighed and smiled at Gabe. Are you tired? A little. Just then they heard Iris scream, Daddy! And then a deep voice say, Where's my little flower? And then laughter and giggles and more screams, and Gabe smiled. My father just got home. Let's go into the kitchen and I'll introduce you. May we video? Gabe shook his head. I wouldn't if I were you. New scene. It's April 27th, Saturday morning at Green Street Mortuary in San Francisco, California. Mark Adams looked down at his father's body where he lay in the casket. It was such an odd feeling. His mother said it was surreal, and that was the perfect word for it. Death was such a strange thing. He'd faced it himself a few times. Everyone in his family had come close to death, some more than once. But the realness of his father's body lying in the casket was an awakening of sorts. Their family was very spiritual. They were strong Christians. They believed in God and in his son, Jesus Christ. They believed in the resurrection, in the Bible, in the gospel, and in living to be holy and good and noble. But this moment, looking down at a body that once moved and spoke and interacted with people, it was really what the gospel was all about. Because this death, this separation from loved ones, it is what brings us all so much pain. And overcoming this death and being together forever with the people we love, it is what we crave. It is the only thing that will give us comfort. That promise, that hope, is what Jesus' life, sacrifice, and resurrection is all about. Mark was feeling mixed emotions about his father's death, and for that he was feeling guilt. He loved his father because the man was his father. But his father was a difficult man to love. He'd been harsh and unkind to his mother. He eventually apologized for that, sort of. He was prideful and a little narcissistic, but who knows what made his father like he was. He didn't talk about his own upbringing very much. Maybe he'd had a difficult childhood that made him the way he was. It wasn't for Mark to judge. It was for Mark to forgive and let it go, which he had done a long time ago. He felt compassion for the man and for his stepmother, Camille. His father and Camille had no children of their own, and now she was left all alone. She had a sister who lived nearby, so that would be some help for her. Mark was sure his family and his brother Joey and sister Bree and even his mom Shelley would do anything they could to help her with whatever arrangements she needed to continue on in this world. He shook his head at the strange, empty feeling that surrounded his heart. He looked up as Joey, his younger brother, joined him at the side of the casket. Joey would be 37 years old in a few months. Mark would be 39 this year. It was strange that standing here over their father's body made him feel like a little boy again. Mark put a hand on his brother's shoulder. You okay, Joey? Yeah, I guess. I'm feeling strange. It's surreal. Mark smiled. Exactly. He turned to look into his brother's eyes. They'd been through a lot together, and Joey had tears in his eyes. I was just thinking about the time we thought Mom was dead, in the water under the rock, Joey said. Mark nodded. Yeah, I'll never forget it. Joey sniffed, and I was thinking that eventually, one day, this will be... He stopped. I get it, Mark said softly. They embraced. Life is strange, Joey went on. Thank God we have a knowledge of our eternal selves. If we didn't have that, think how hopeless it would be. Yeah, you're right. It would be more than hopeless. Every minute of every day would be scary. We would be full of fear. Think about it. That's how some people go through life, so afraid of death. And we've been blessed to have the Holy Spirit bear witness to us of what is on the other side, and even we are terrified of losing a loved one. How must they feel with no hope at all? Joey nodded. But our comfort is in Jesus. Amen to that. What's going on here, guys? Bree said softly. They turned and smiled at their sister and parted, included her in a group hug. Just talking about life and death, Joey answered. Bree nodded and wiped at her tears and looked from face to face. Have I told you guys lately how much I love you? Mark smiled. Not lately. Well, I do. Shoot, Bree, we knew that, Joey said with a soft laugh. But did you know that we love you too? She smiled. I do. They turned to find their seats and saw their families smiling at them. Their mom and Eric were seated in the pew right behind Camille. Even though their mom was the ex, she and Camille had become good friends, and that was as it should be. They were sure their mother was a huge comfort for the woman. As Robert's children, Bree, Mark, and Joey took their place next to Camille, while the rest of their family sat a few rows back, the entire chapel was packed. Bree frowned just before she sat when she realized that their pictures were being taken by people in the pews, their phones held high. Even though Jason had provided security for the event, they still couldn't escape the publicity. There was a fairly large amount of people in attendance. Robert Adams had run a prominent dinner theater here in San Francisco, and there were a lot of actors and performers who came to pay their respects. Taylor, young Eric, JoJo, and Logan all sat together with Ricky in the aisle seat of that row. It was silly to watch people come up to the casket, then turn to go back to their seats and see them sneak pictures of that particular group. The three young men had been quite the item for a while when they decided to make some music and put out a video a few years earlier. But the boys had gone off in other directions, and only Logan remained pursuing music. Still, whenever anyone spotted them together, they caused quite a stir. Taylor, too, was a much sought-after pick, but people were very careful about taking and posting her picture because they didn't want to tangle with her father. Many had lost. The pastor of the church Robert and Camille attended gave a loving and beautiful eulogy, and then the family members only were invited out to the gravesite. Shelley and Eric stayed behind, but all of Robert's children, grandchildren, daughters-in-law, and son-in-law went to the gravesite, along with Camille and her sister's children. The graveside service was short. Afterward, friends and family were invited to the house to eat and offer comfort to Camille. Shelley was glad to see members of Robert's church there. Shelley herself had arranged for the catering of the event and made a mental note to give them a good review, for they were doing an excellent job. She was surveying the crowd, trying to assess where she might be needed. She saw Bree hugging Camille, then pull away and clasp her hands. Shelley nodded. She saw Mark shaking the hand of Camille's sister's husband. She saw Joey kneeling down, speaking to his two oldest, Sophia and Kelston. She turned to find Taylor surrounded by a group of teen boys, looking like she wanted to escape. Shelley caught Brother Eric's eye and motioned toward his sister, and he immediately left the group of people he'd been conversing with and went to join the conversation with Taylor. Shelley knew that within a few minutes he'd have a reason to take her hand and steer her away. Good move, Eric said as he came up to stand behind his wife. Shelley smiled. Poor girl, someone needed to save her. Eric turned her toward him. So, how are you feeling? She shrugged and shook her head. I don't know. I feel a little like crying. I feel a little confused. Life is so strange, and death is even stranger. I told the boys it was the ultimate reality. It's one thing to say we believe in eternal life and will be with our loved ones again after we die. And when we're confronted with actual death, it's harder, surreal, but ultimately real. Do you believe or do you know? Do you believe or do you know? Well, I'm not sure at this moment. Eric nodded. Well, don't let that discourage you. Doubts are normal. It's part of our human existence, so let's go back to basics. How many times do you think you've heard God's voice? She sighed. Well, really, it's been too many to count. Eric smiled at her. How many times have you felt something move through you, like a tingly warmth that told you something was true or real? Again, too many to count. And how many times have you thought maybe God was giving you a sign, and then he confirmed it by offering you at least one, or sometimes even more than one, synchronicity? Eric asked. My journal is full of accountings of those things. He nodded. And how many miracles brought you and I together? Several. Name one. You had dreams about me and recognized me the moment you first saw me. Name another. Well, I know I set my alarm the morning of that first tournament, but it didn't go off, so I was running late, and you went looking for Ricky, and I ran right into you. A coincidence? Eric asked. Not when you consider how many miracles have taken place in our lives. Name one. I heard a voice tell me to not give up when James was trying to get me to kill myself. You actually heard it? Yes. Are you sure about that? Yes. He smiled. Name another. I had my tubes tied after Joey was born, but somehow still got pregnant with Juneflower. And what has Jeffy done for the world? So much. She's taking away cancer and AIDS and heart disease and much more. She's been responsible for millions of lives saved in Africa and in the whole world. Do you think she was meant to be? Absolutely. Was she one of God's miracles or was she a coincidence? She was definitely a miracle. Have you ever met someone who's seen an angel, who was trapped inside the earth but there was light, who should have been dead but was found alive, whose cousin most definitely should have been dead but lived? Only you. Have you met others and or read about others who have seen or been touched by an angel? She nodded. Yes. Can you think of these few things and know that there are so many more that we could talk about and still deny them? She shook her head, her eyes filled with tears. I cannot deny. He reached out and cupped her face in his strong hand. We know these things. We cannot deny them. Even so, it's still hard for us as humans to integrate these things into our psyche. We have talked the talk. When someone passes to the next phase of life, it is time for us to walk the walk. The tears ran down her cheeks. It's so difficult. For me too, he agreed. So many times when someone in our family came close to death, I couldn't stand the thought. I thought I too would die from anguish. Why, when I know of a certainty that God is real? When you died under that rock, when Ricky was taken, when Joey was shot, when Mark fell over that cliff, when Jeffy snuck up to Seattle, and even recently when Gabe was taken. And then there were the actual deaths, when Beth died, and when Ann died, and now Robert. But when am I going to stand up and show God that I indeed believe? Shelley nodded. I do believe. I know you do, sweet Shelley. I'll try harder to walk the walk, she said. Me too. How can we do that? She asked. He used his thumbs to wipe away her tears and kissed her softly on the mouth. Let's start here, by being in service to these people. In service how? By doing exactly what you were doing when I walked up to you a minute ago, except instead of standing off observing, let's jump in and talk to every single person we can and assess what we can do to help them. They may just need a quick prayer, or maybe a healing, or maybe some bills taken care of, or even just a kind word. God will lead us. Listen to him. Shelley smiled. Let's do it. And they went to work. And that is the end of chapter 18.